George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
It's all out war. DavidCameron, the British Foreign Secretary, says we are in. And that means the United States must be too. Netanyahu tells DavidCameron that they are going to attack the territory of Iran. Iran has promised condign punishment within seconds if the slightest assault on Iranian territory should take place. So batten down the hatches, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows. Let's hope we get through to the end. Stay tuned for 2 hours of top analysis from top guests and the best calls and a monologue worth listening to. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
I'm slightly handicapped this evening. Well, I don't have my wife for a start, and you know how much I rely upon her. Hence, I come amongst you unmade up, so I hope I'm not startling you too much. Secondly, there is the distinct possibility I'll have to run off and vote in the House of Commons on the finance bill, otherwise known as the budget. I'll try and miss it and keep on talking to you, but you may hear a division bell ringing, so don't be startled by that either. As you'll have guessed, I'm in the Houses of Parliament right now. I was just saying to the Prime Minister, well, twice actually. I spoke to him on Monday and I spoke to him again this afternoon at Prime Minister's question. Neither exchange was particularly satisfactory. I asked him why he had not found any word, not a single word, to condemn the Israeli attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus, which was, after all, the proximate reason for the extraordinary events of last weekend, where hundreds of drones, which were never intended to reach their target, were known to be certain to be shot down by the Iron Dome, by British and American and even Jordanian ordnance before they reached their target, but 8 ballistic missiles which were guaranteed to reach their target and did. Lucky for Israel, that target was a military base, but it could easily have been the billionaire's villa in Tel Aviv, underground which Netanyahu was skulking like a rat, leaving his people to face the music that he had invited into their homes. When I asked Rishisunak why he had not found one word to condemn a brazen breach of international law, of the Vienna Conventions, which make inviolable diplomatic property in all countries, for every country, all he could say was, whatever happened in Damascus, the Iranian response was completely over-egged, that it was disproportionate. Well, what did happen in Damascus? The State of Israel, using American-supplied weapons and aircraft, launched missiles at the Consulate of the Iranian embassy, sovereign property of Iran, just the same as if you dropped a bomb on Iran itself. It killed 10 people, at least 10 people, some of them Iranian generals, others Iranian diplomats, others Syrian workers, local workers in the embassy. It was an act of mass murder. If you came upon someone who'd gone into a building and murdered 10 people, you'd call that mass murder. And when you add the diplomatic impact of making such an attack on another country's embassy, well, you have a crisis, one that they are not prepared to talk about, for the most part, in Western media or in Western politics. It was obviously going to ensure an Iranian response. It was intended to bring forth an Iranian response because Netanyahu wants a war with Iran, because he hoped that Britain and the United States would join that war alongside him, thus extending his tenure as Prime Minister of Israel. The only way to extend it, the only way for Netanyahu to stay out of prison. Now, Joe Biden and rishisunak, he told me in Parliament, was cautioning restraint, asking Israel not to retaliate to Iran's retaliation. But then DavidCameron flew to Tel Aviv and met with Netanyahu today and has declared that Israel is going to launch a retaliation inside Iran and that Britain will support it. Thus, I've got to put it this way, we have the beginnings of all-out war. We have Israel, the United Kingdom, and the United States openly saying that they're going to be involved in an attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran. Russia and China and Iran will be up against them. Russia and China have made it absolutely clear that they support the Iranian action last weekend over Israel, and they will defend Iran if Israel attacks it with Western support. I don't know what you call that. I call that World War III. I call Iran, Russia, and China on one side, Israel, the UK, and the US on the other side. I call that World War III because everybody knows that the Iranian attack on Israel will be 10 times greater than the one they launched last weekend. And it will not be telegraphed 5, 10, 15 days in advance. It won't be telegraphed 15 minutes in advance. And it will involve far more deadly missiles than were fired last weekend. It will involve weapons that Iran has never used before, and that nobody in the West knows the true nature and character of, because unlike most countries, Iran makes all of its own armaments. And judging by the demand for them, they're pretty effective at that. And yet, it is utterly remarkable that Western politicians are not only speaking of other things, but are speaking of anything but this impending World War III. I'm not sure if they've even given up the manufacturing of consent. They're just giving their green light to Netanyahu to launch what will become World War III. They're not even seeking to persuade people of the correctness of their action. An unelected Prime Minister has gotten an unelected Foreign Secretary who was ennobled by the unelected head of the British state, who went to Tel Aviv to give his green light to the forthcoming war. If nobody else sees the gigantic chasm of a democratic deficit that represents, well, I'm not sure that they are fit to be running our affairs. So when I asked Sunak this afternoon, I spoke twice this afternoon in Parliament, both times about Gaza, something of a parliamentary record, I'm told. When I asked him this morning, you said you were asking Netanyahu for restraint. What are you going to do if he rejects your advice and launches an unrestrained attack on Iran? Answer came there, none, not even an attempt at an answer. They're just going to do it. That means they're putting your children, your house, your life on the line without even a by your leave, without even a vote in this puppet parliament. the outcome of which will be guaranteed, but they will not even allow that. At Prime Minister's Questions today, not one person raised this crisis except me. Not one out of 650. There they were with their student union japes, laughing across the aisle at each other, talking about anything, everything, but the fact that by the weekend we could be in an all-out war. They were talking about Liz Truss's memoir, which will be remaindered in all good bookshops for 99 pence by the end of the month. Nobody in their right mind wants to read the memoir of someone who was Prime Minister for 40 days, the shortest tenure of any Prime Minister in modern British history. And I've got to tell you something. I don't like to be mean, especially about women. But as I saw her speak in the House of Commons yesterday, I again marveled that such a diminutive, unprepossessing figure could possibly have ever become the Prime Minister of Britain. And I'm counting Rishi Sunak and other miserable British Prime Ministers in that ranking. There can never have been a more utterly inadequate figure ever to occupy 10 Downing Street. And there have been some stumours in that job. But that's all they talked about this afternoon. Angela Rayner, the Labour deputy leader's tax affairs, her council house sale, Liz Truss's ruminations on her parliamentary colleagues. Not one person asked, other than me, are we going to be at war by the weekend? How's that going to go? It is truly extraordinary. The diminished, degraded nature of the British political class, and I'm certain that the American political class is no better. In fact, the only thing we don't have here, and I'm following Aipac tracker, and you should too, it is staggering. People you have never heard of, even if you're an American, people you have never heard of, receiving 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million, Joe Biden's case, $11.1 million from the Israel lobby. Talk about bought and sold. America's interests have been completely purchased by the supporters of Israel. No wonder they're going so gung-ho into the forthcoming war. They've been paid already to do so. And Israel has the receipts. They can do no other but to stand for and with Israel, even if it harms irreparably the national interests of the United States of America. Now, other European countries are not quite so stupid as ours, whereas you might think that Britain, as the author of the entire Palestinian tragedy, disaster, Nakba, catastrophe, would feel some historical obligation to actually try and steer some kind of balanced course in the events unfolding in the Middle East. The opposite is true. Britain, the colonial power that founded the state of Israel, is backing its own creation, a country with 3 million people of fighting age, against another of its colonial possessions, namely the now Islamic Republic of Iran. When I raised this in the House of Commons this week, there were all kinds of bemused looks, partly because most of them looked to be about 19 years old, on the Labour benches in particular. When I said, do you think the Iranians are listening to you? You who occupied their country, who looted their wealth, and who overthrew their one ever democratic socialist prime minister elected by the people in a democratic election. Britain overthrew them. In my lifetime, well, it was in 1953. I was inside my mother's tummy when it happened, but I was still alive when this happened. It's not ancient history, but nobody knew it. And nobody understood that with a history like that, in modern times, why would Iran listen to little rishisunak, the shoeshine boy of the American empire, on these matters? But the die is cast. DavidCameron, close friend of a pig, was the man chosen to announce Britain's participation in what may become a third world war. It is truly amazing that we have reached this stage, not even sleepwalking, but in some kind of political coma. First over Ukraine, and now in defense of Israel with its 3 million people of fighting age against a country, Iran, with 41 million people of fighting age, with a fleet of ballistic hypersonic missiles of a standard of the big superpowers, that we ended up where we are. Who do you think is going to be doing Israel's fighting for it? Israel could not have repelled even the deliberately disabled Iranian effort over their skies, over their territory last weekend. It needed British jets. It needed American firepower. It needed the American-supplied Iron Dome. And it needed the little king of Jordan to defend them. Imagine the Jordanian people, a great people, Bedouin Arab people, with millions of Palestinians living on their land, with 1 million or 2 Iraqis living on their land, served Israel last weekend. I don't know about you. I wouldn't put much money on the chances of the little king lasting much longer in Jordan, or the little prime minister lasting much longer in Britain, or the little president in Paris managing to see out his term, never mind be re-elected for another, or little Joe Biden, diminutive, diminished, degraded, demented, leading the American people into what might be an historic tragedy which can reach even over the Atlantic. We'll have excellent guests. Professor Marandi from the University of TEHRAN in the second hour, and the inimitable New Yorker Gerald Celente talking from the United States about how all this is playing out. We've got a poll running. Has Israel lost the war? Overwhelmingly, people say yes. But it turns out, actually, that the war has only just begun. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I told you about the poll. Has Israel lost the war? It's a simple question, yes or no. 32,450 people have already voted, and I'm only announcing it now. Get your vote in. You can vote on my Telegram channel. That's t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter handle, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or on any platform that allows you to share, please share with all of your friends, all of your followers now. The phone number, if you want to join in, is this. It's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 44203 966 2625. Gerald Celente is one of my very favourite guests. He wears a hat sometimes. I don't know if he does this evening, but he's funny and perspicacious at exactly the same time. He's the publisher of Trends Journal and founder of the Trends Research Institute. If you're not following Trends Journal, then you're a fool, because Gerald predicts. He doesn't track. He predicts what's coming next with unerring accuracy. Gerald, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Very good to see you again. Not wearing your hat, but of fond memory. Gerald, what do you think of my thesis that actually the world will be at war by the weekend? How are you feeling about that?
Well, the world's at war already. World War III began. It was a cover of our Trends Journal magazine on February 22nd, 2022. From COVID war to Ukraine war to World War. And it's only escalating now with the Israel war. And I was listening to you before we went on the air, and you nailed it perfectly. And by the way, I also want to congratulate you for all that you do as a real man, standing up and fighting and being in the British Parliament now and speaking the truth.
Thank you.
And as you were saying, when you said what was going on in Israel and giving them the history of it, you said it was like talking to little kids. And that's where we're at now. And you talked about Iran. This is one of my books called Trend Tracking, far better than Megatrends Time magazine. 1989, I wrote this book. I write how I became a trend forecaster. And I became a political atheist when, and it's right here, the fall of the Shah. I was the chief government affairs specialist for the chemical industry. #2 guy running a major trade association. Back then, all I wanted to do was make money and have a good time. I was killing environmental legislation at the height of the environmental movement. And I'm living between DC and Chicago. And the Iranian conflict starts heating up. And Jimmy Carter, the little peanut farmer with a pair of cojones about the size of a peanut, he goes over there to visit the Shah on New Year's Eve with the Shah and his wife. I write about this in detail. He came back and he said that the Shah is the island of stability in the Middle East. In the Bronx, we used to say bullshit has its own sound. I'm seeing millions of people taking to the streets. The average person, like the little dopes you speak to in Parliament, these little boys and gutless girls, they had no idea of the United States, and as you were talking about, the UK overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953, because that lousy Iranian president had the nerve to say, no, this oil doesn't belong to Anglo-Iranian oil. or Standard Oil, oh, better known today as BP and, it's ExxonMobil back then, Standard Oil today. It belongs to the Iranian people. No, it doesn't. And all the data came out. It only took until 2017 for the crap that spewed out of that little Churchill's mouth. The MI6, him, and the CIA that was also headed by Kermit Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, to overthrow Mossadegh. So when the people are taking to the streets, I said, no, this thing is for real. And that's how I became a trend forecaster. I became a political atheist, and I stopped believing the BS in the mainstream media, and I started investing in gold and oil. That's when I became a trend forecaster. I said, what will the implications be? And gold and oil, a $10,000 bet, I made almost $750,000. And I quit my job and I became a trend forecaster. I lost a lot of the dough. I was, gambling away. But now what's going on is the same thing. All they're doing is teaching us how to hate Iran. You're seeing all the sanctions, the crap, the puke coming out of the mouth of the politicians. We're condemning Iran for attacking Israel. Hey, wait a minute. Israel could attack Iran anytime they want. They could attack a consulate that's against international law, even at a time of war. They could kill any commander. They could kill anybody they want anywhere. That's right. We're the chosen people. Oh, it says so right in the Torah, chapter 6, section 8. You're making up this crap. Now they're putting sanctions on Iran. This thing is heating up. Israel is going to strike back. When they do, World War III is going to continue to escalate. If we don't have peace on earth, we are going to be annihilated in nuclear war. Oh, don't believe me? Look up the SamsonOption. Oh, yeah, in Israel, SamsonOption, if we lose, we go nuclear. And we only have about between 200 and 400 nuclear warheads. Oh, you have nuclear warheads? That's right. But Iran's not allowed to have them. We're the chosen people. This is serious.
It's deadly serious, Gerald. And sometimes I think there's only thee and me can see it. I've been following your coverage online, and I'm a big supporter of your journal. And I'm just wondering how it is that the United States, I'll come to the UK in a minute. How did the United States walk quietly into a situation where virtually every politician is literally bought and paid for by the supporters of Israel? And I'm talking people who wouldn't be a legend in their own street. I'm talking people whose faces I've never seen, whose names I've never heard. They're the congresswoman or man from this or that. And they're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from a foreign country, which doesn't even have to register as a foreign agent, such that your country is no longer in control of its own destiny. How does Joe Biden tell Netanyahu to go and get lost when Israel gave him $11.1 million? How?
He doesn't. Again, the whole thing is bought off, and you're making it perfectly clear that nobody knows about Aipac, foreign establishment, and they're doing anything that they want. They're buying off everybody. America, this is the country that kills people all over the world in the name of freedom and democracy. To run for office in America, you got to have a lot of money behind you. By the way, I began my career running political campaigns in Westchester County, the richest county in America. I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate, designed and instructed American politics and campaign technology, how to run campaigns, taught it at St. John's University. What people call a government is nothing more than a crime syndicate. And I also, by the way, I watched your podcast with your show with Scott Ritter on following Iran's attack. All of the media in America and all of the little imbeciles that follow the mainstream media believe that Israel was victorious in stopping Iran when they attacked, knowing nothing of the facts. Everybody should listen to that podcast that you did with Scott Ritter and how you introduced him and who he is. And he's a friend of mine. We go out to dinner. He's talking at my peace rallies up here. I launched Occupy Peace over a decade ago. He gives the details, but here was the headlines that the people swallow. Iran has launched dozens of drones at Israel. IDF says it aims to intercept them in hours. And then they said 99% of them were destroyed. And again, have no details about the facts of this. So everybody, please watch that video. Scott Ritter makes it clear of the true danger Israel is in. And also, Mr. Galloway, you were talking about how they created, when I heard some of it before I came on the air, about how they invented the state of Israel. This is your Trends Journal when it used to be a quarterly, 2006, Crusades 2000. Regardless of what England's reasons or intentions were, self-serving or otherwise, Crusades 2000 was set in motion by the 1917 Balfour Declaration. Oh, what's a Balfour Declaration? Well, we don't know anything, but a Balfour Declaration that laid the foundation for Israel, quote, His Majesty's government, His Majesty's government, these murderous bastards over there where the sun never sets on the British Empire, we are slaughtering people all over the world. Oh, that's right, His Majesty's government. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Who the hell is he to say that they should establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine? Oh, the Rothschilds. Look it up. It's a fact. It goes on. And we will use our best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objective. Totally invented. Totally invented. Have no right being there. Oh, and they just stole about another 7,000 acres of Palestinian land in the West Bank that they call settlements in violation of the Geneva Convention and Article 242 of the United Nations. This is serious what's going on. This is a demonic government in charge,
very
slaughtering
serious.
innocent people.
Yeah, slaughtering 72% of the people who've been slaughtered were women and children. Ipso facto, by definition, not Hamas. The idea that these women and children were legitimate targets would not be accepted in any other theater of conflict. It would not be accepted as legitimate behavior by any other government anywhere in the world, including your government, including my government. But it is somehow acceptable for Israel to do it. And when they can no longer defend it, they simply begin not to report it. So 11 children were killed yesterday in a playground in the Benghazi refugee camp in Gaza. 11 children. Not one single British newspaper or British media outfit even reported that it happened. Talk about exceptionalism, Gerald.
Actually, at least, yep. And matter of fact, you know who did report it in the United States was the Cartoon News Network, CNN. And it said at least 13 people were killed, including several children, and more than 25 injured after a strike targeted the al-Maghazi refugee camp. And they show the graphics, the videos, and this is the nice language. You ready? Dozens of people appear to be running around in panic. They had the video, screaming and trying to count and carry the dead bodies. It shows several casualties scattered on the floor, including children with blood streaming across the floor. Kids screaming, people screaming, kids dead on the ground. They were just playing football and they were martyred. This guy's, again, right in front of everybody's eyes. Like you said, could you imagine if it was the Jewish people in Gaza and the Palestinians were bombing them to death like this? Oh my God, how terrible. The hypocrisy.
It
The
is.
hypocrisy.
It's
Again,
very
going back
difficult
to
to
Iran.
bear. It's very. Yeah, it's very
Again,
difficult to remain unemotional about it. But let me try and segue before I start crying. You are a political atheist, and your attitude is, you know, a plague on both, on all of their houses, and that's no wonder when we see the character of the people that are running for office. But because you are the most perspicacious man in America, help our international audience with your reading so far on how the American presidential election is going.
It's a guessing game. We had the Trends Journal magazine, and by the way, anybody could get the Trends Journal magazine by going to trendsjournal.com, and you get 10% off. Hit MOATS, they'll put up the link to put on, and it's only $2.50 a week. It's nothing. And this week's is almost 200 pages, and you can listen to it. It's a magazine. You read what you want. But going back to the presidential election, we called Trump a winner in May of 2016 when we said that we were the only ones saying it. All the polls showed he would lose. Right now, it's a total guessing game. And again, I've been at this, I said, a lot of years. I used to run political campaigns, taught at St. John's University, on and on. One of my lines is, when all else fails, they take you to war. When you go to war, people have they back the president that's in power. If you need any more proof, let's go back to the .com bust. Again, we had forecasted in your Trends Journal, .com this, fall of 1999. We said it was going to bust by the second quarter of 2000. It did in March. America's in a deep recession. They couldn't stand little Georgie Bush. What happens? 9/11. War on terror. We're going to get that guy Osama bin Laden, dead or alive. A little boy of nothing with a pair of cojones smaller than a mothball, a little ignorant little jerk of a nothing, a daddy's boy. 88% of the people swallow the crap spewing out of his mouth. When all else fails, they take you to war. Nobody could predict what's going to go on with this presidential reality show. That's all it is. And also, as people are watching, again, one of my lines is GC's 3Gs, guns, gold, and a getaway plan. You better prepare for the worst. One of our top trends for 2024, it's right there for anybody to see, January 2nd, 2024, a golden year for gold. Gold prices are up now over $300 an ounce since we said that. The reason gold is going up, there are basic reasons. One, in the run-up to the presidential reality show, they're going to lower interest rates to keep the power in the United States. Miss Facha Brut, the ugly face, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, her former job was the head of the Federal Reserve, shows you who's running the country. She's the Treasury Secretary. They want to keep her in there. They're going to lower interest rates. The lower interest rates go, the deeper the dollar falls, and it's going to be the beginning of the death of the dollar, the higher gold prices go. Number two, oil prices, which are going to bring inflation in very heavily if and when, not if, when the Israel war and Iran war escalate. You're going to see oil prices hit around $130 a barrel. That's going to crash the global economy and the equity markets. Number three is they're going to do everything they can to come out with a digital currency. And when they do that, gold prices are going to go up too. That's another one that's pushing them up. So you got the inflation, you got gold, and you got the war. The war is going to keep heating up, and that's going to really bring up gold prices. Gold prices, as we're speaking now, are about $2,375 an ounce. It was up as almost $3,240 an ounce today. It backed off. We can see gold hitting around $3,000 an ounce this year. This is serious. The reason, again, the other reason they're buying it, you go to China. The China economy, when they locked the place down for 3 years, it destroyed the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. The place was overbuilt after they brought him into the World Trade Organization in 2001. Bill Clinton did. And they skyrocketed their GDP. It got overbuilt. They made a bad situation worse with 3 years of COVID lockdown. So what's going on? The real estate sector in China accounts for nearly 30% of the gross domestic product. And the real estate sector is crashing. What also is going to bring gold prices up that no one's talking about, that's one of our top trends of 2024, is banks go bust. When they lock down everything and force people to stay at home, and you're in the UK, and listen, you're great over there, and that was a Canary Wharf, what do they call it, where all the HSBC, one after another, are leaving. The office vacancy rate in New York City is 23%. San Francisco, 30%. Portland, Oregon, 29%. On average, over 20%. Office vacancy rate, nobody there, around 50%. There's going to be huge defaults on these trillions. It's almost $2 trillion worth of commercial real estate. You're going to see massive defaults. They're not talking about this at all. That's going to crash the banking system. That's why gold prices are going to go up also. But again, when all else fails, they take you to war.
Well, I'd be rushing off to buy some gold, A, if I had the money to buy it, and B, if I thought you could take it with you. But as none of this might matter in the end, all I can say is everyone watching this should get on to the trend. They should get on. We'll put it up, Trends Journal. We'll put up the link. Everybody should get on it. It's actually the best predictor for all matters, economic and political, that I have ever seen. Gerald, many thanks for joining us and for imparting your words of wisdom. By the way, Gerald, the Scott Ritter interview that you referred to has 688,000 views on YouTube alone. That means it's got well over 1 million views in the last 2 days, 48 hours. That's how good it was. Gerald, thanks for everything. Let me take a quick break, and then I'll be right back with your calls. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Well, I just thought you might like to hear these stats. We are right at this moment in time beating Sky News, GB News, and Talk TV, all on YouTube, all in their primetime slots, which cost them millions. Now, has Israel lost the war? Most people say yes, but I think that was the last war. The next war is coming by the weekend. Let me read you this about the podcast. The MOATS podcast is currently number 2 on Apple in Jordan, number 12 in Russia. In Russia! Who speaks English in Russia? We are number 12. We are number 1 in the Bahamas, which maybe is where we all will need to run before this is all over. And we're number 1 in Macedonia. Imagine, in Macedonia, the MOATS podcast is the number 1 podcast. So we're holding our position really well in the top 40 across the whole world. Don't forget, if you've just joined the show, you can download this bite-sized version of the mother of all talk shows, the MOATS podcast, by scanning that QR code in the corner of your screen. Let's go to Mohammad in New York on Israel. Go ahead, Mohammad.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Galloway, for having me. Believe me or not, we are really frustrated by watching the news these days, what's really happening in Palestine, and now it's happening in Iran, and before that was the COVID, then after that was Ukraine. So the world is in chaos. The world is in chaos. And like you were saying, unfortunately, America is occupied by a different group. And one of the most important group is Aipac. And they are the one that controls America from top to bottom. We all know that. And unfortunately, today, I was watching one of your show, and I never met this guy, Gerald Celente, right? If I'm not mistaken in pronouncing his name, yeah. My apology. This guy is the best. I'm telling you, he has one of the best knowledgeable person in America, probably. And also, exactly. Wait, I forgot to thank you, Mr. Galloway. You are very well known throughout the world. I always watch your show. Believe me or not, God bless you, because you are such a wonderful person with a beautiful mind. And we always make duas and praise for you. You stay like that. May God bless you all the time. Believe me or not. May God shower you with his blessing, because you are standing on the right path. And the world needs to know that, United Nations needs to restructure. United Nations is the one that is at the head of the snake, I would say it. It's time for them to restructure itself. The world is bigger than the 5. What I mean by that, the Security Councils.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mohammed, I'm hurrying you on only because so many people are trying to get on. But thank you for your very, very beautiful words. I'd only respond thus, that the United States will never, the United Nations will never restructure, because you would need the permission of the people who are the problem in the United Nations before you could restructure it. You'd, for example, to abolish the veto of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, you would need one of them not to veto it, and that isn't going to happen. To change to a more democratic basis, you'd have to have one of them not to veto it, and that isn't going to happen. My own view, it's a controversial one, is that China and the Russians and the other BRICS should leave the United Nations. They should set up an alternative United Nations in a neutral country, maybe Switzerland, though it ain't as neutral as it used to be. They should act as a lodestar to countries that want to be non-aligned, countries that don't want to live under United States domination. As long as the UN is in New York, as long as the Security Council has its current representation and its current rules and regulations, it's worse than useless, because people still have faith in it, and yet they are not worthy of that faith. Mohammed, great call. Douglas is also in the US, in Colorado, and wants to talk about Trump. Go ahead, Douglas.
Watch that video.
Douglas, are you there?
I am here.
Go ahead. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
Oh, I'm talking to George?
Yes, you're talking to the whole world, so press on, please.
Okay. All right. I'm relatively new to your show. I really enjoy watching it. My thoughts on world politics are in alignment with yours, but I've never heard you mention Donald Trump very much. And I'd like to get your insights as to where we're headed with him.
Okay, Douglas, thanks for that. You must be a new viewer if you haven't heard me mention Donald Trump. I've been talking about him for almost the last 10 years. I wasn't happy that Donald Trump became the president of the United States, but I was very happy that Hillary Clinton did not. And although I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein of the Green Party and hope that she does well, I will not be happy if Donald Trump comes back for a second term, but I'll be very, very, very happy that Joe Biden isn't. That's my take. What's yours, Douglas?
I don't know. I get most of my news from MSNBC, and they seem to keep us all on the edge of our seats as to what's going to happen. I will vote for Joe Biden because I'm just not a Trump fan at all. But I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
We're kept on the edge
Well,
of
I
our
urge you
seats,
to look at Dr. Stein's manifesto. She has the best policies for America. But I must beseech you not to vote for another 4 years of this senile, Alzheimer's stricken lunatic who's leading the whole world to the eve of destruction. You're old enough to remember Barry Maguire, Eve of Destruction. Somebody needs to write a follow-up to that epic song. Douglas in Colorado, thanks for your call. Amir Karimi says, I really like Gerald Celente. He's just awesome. He truly, truly is. Frankie says, I remember Liz Truss and her disgraceful behavior in Moscow, treating Lavrov with complete disrespect. Arsenal Maniac says, Galloway is crushing these clowns in Parliament. Thanks for that. And now Gerald mentioned his book. To see the Trends Journal, go to trendsjournal.com and use code MOATS, capitals, MOATS, for a discount on Gerald's journal. I think you'll thank me for it if you do. Now, let me see. Benny Hill says it was disgusting how they laughed and sneered like a bunch of public school bullies in a playground. Yes, but Benny, I speak to be heard beyond those walls, like my hero Charles James Fox, the 18th century political giant who was repeatedly put out of the House of Commons and repeatedly carried back in by the votes of the people who had votes in those days. He was a truly revolutionary man. He was a very great orator indeed. Charles James Fox. He said, when they were shouting him down, I speak as to be heard beyond these walls. And that's exactly what I do here in this building. William Four says, when the Israeli Darth Vader mask is removed, behind it is a sniveling, weak victim. And Skywalk Trice I Am says, greetings from Montreal. I have such fond memories of Montreal, where I really wish someone would pull a George Galloway in former MP David Lametti's riding. Well, I wish I could. I love Montreal, one of the greatest cities I've ever visited. Elmina Ahmed says, if only our politicians have their eyes as open as George. Thank you, Elmina. And Jahangir Hussein says, I don't get this Aipac business. The USA gives billions and politicians receive billions from their own donated money. My mind boggles. Yeah, think about it. Joe Biden got $11.1 million from them. He gave them $80 billion of American taxpayers' money, of which he got 11.1 million. Of course, it wasn't direct. Some of it was under the table. Some of it was around the houses. But that is, I'm afraid, the long and the short of it. Let's hear from Mohammad in Saudi Arabia on Gerald's interview. Mohammad, most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Galloway. First, allow me to...
Yes?
First, allow me to congratulate you on going back on the floor. And actually, you're the person who brings sanity. Hello?
Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you, sir.
Yes. I just wanted to say that Mr. Your previous guest was talking about the reasons why the spot gold is going up. Although I see it in my own view, I see it that he was very skeptical. Gold shouldn't be less than 4,000, 4,500 an ounce. And that's not even long term. This is like medium, short term. Reason being, what he forgot to mention was BRICS. BRICS is going to bring up a currency that is solely on gold. And it's going to be controlling, it's going to be instead of petrodollar, it's going to be the currency that you buy and sell oil with. And it's going to be backed up with gold. I just wanted to add that, and I wanted to congratulate you.
Well, it's good that you added it. I very much hope for a BRICS currency. I'd like to have BRICS currency. I'd like to be paid in BRICS currency if anybody paid me. But sadly, only the British Parliament pays me, and they're not likely to join the BRICS anytime soon. But if the BRICS do develop their own currency, I, for one, will encourage everyone to move into it big time. Mohammed, thanks for that great call from Saudi Arabia. Last call before the break is in New Mexico, where Pat wants to talk about Israel. Go ahead, Pat.
Hello, George, from the woke state of New Mexico, where our politicians disappear into Washington after making their promises, which are actually not that great, where they ruin our education system, ban the parents from have any control over their child's education, and live off the largesse of the Zionist donations to their accounts. It's a horrible feeling.
Well, I've never been in New Mexico, but a very good friend of mine, the late and great Sir Gerald Kaufman, the Jewish Labour MP, champion of Palestinian rights, champion of Kashmir, one of the finest parliamentarians. Sir Gerald used to holiday in New Mexico every single year, so it must be very beautiful.
It's a beautiful place. But horrid politics.
Yeah, of course, but politics are no better in any of the other states of the Union. Your point is that the New Mexico politicians are bought and paid for just like all the others, is that right?
Precisely. They care about their donors. They do not care about the welfare.
You would. I mean, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, as the great Malcolm X said. These lightweights that are elected to Congress and even to the Senate they stand for nothing. So they do fall for anything. And along comes the Israel lobby. I'm just talking about Aipac money, by the way. There's lots more to be had. Some of it in brown envelopes, some of it not declared at all. These people all become millionaires, Pat. You go to Washington, you come back a millionaire.
They're not. They have trouble driving over our roads that they've neglected, though. You won't believe it.
Amazing.
Our highways with potholes and
I absolutely believe it. I absolutely believe it. Pat in New Mexico, many thanks. Let's take a quick break and then the oracle on all matters Iran. Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, the head of American Studies at the University of Tehran. We'll get an early indication from him of what Iran is expecting next. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, read by George Galloway, available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, we are now being watched by more people than Talk TV, Sky News, and GB News put together. Ha! No wonder they hate us. Now, here's the numbers again. If you're in the US and Canada, it's +1 844 944 3344. If you're in the UK or Ireland, it's 0808 196 5522. If you're in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Most people are in the rest of the world, of course, although if you live in the West, you very often find that very difficult to find as a fact. Most people in the West think that we are the world. They talk about the international community when they mean the US and the UK, and maybe some parts, the whiter ones, the whiter parts of the EU, as the international community. But of course, only 13% of the people of the world live in those three areas. Very much at the center of the new world that is coming into view is Iran, where Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi is a towering academic and intellectual and commentator, and we are very lucky to have him once again back on the mother of all talk shows. Professor, thank you for joining us again so soon, but you're the only show in town. Iran is now at the center of the world. DavidCameron, the pig farmer from England, is there now, and he's told us that there's going to be an attack on Iran and that he is going to support it. So the scene is set, isn't it, for some very dramatic events? Please tell us.
Well, the Israeli regime has threatened to attack Iran, and if they don't, it will be a humiliation in itself. But I think of all these different regimes, the United States so far has been more smart in the sense that they have said that they're opposed to another strike. And the reason is that they know that the balance of power lies in Iran's favor. After the Iranian strike, the Western media has been saying what a great victory this was for the Israelis, but it was a catastrophic defeat, and it goes back to your introduction, where you were saying, before I spoke, where you were saying that some people in the West think that this is the world. It isn't. When the Israeli regime struck the Iranian embassy and murdered Iranians and local employees, the world was outraged. The international community was outraged. The Americans and the British and the French governments, they went to the UN Security Council and prevented a condemnation. They supported the bombing of the embassy, which is a major violation of international law, and it shows that these countries have no respect for the laws and norms that they are always, at least in theory, advocating. But the rest of the world stood with Iran. And that gave Iran the opportunity to punish the Israeli regime. What did Iran do? They sent, after 10 days of playing mind games with the Israelis, they announced that they're going to attack. They sent a couple of hundred drones, very old drones with no new technology. And the Israeli regime fell into the trap. And so did the Americans. They fired all their high-tech missiles and used all their high-tech equipment, giving Iran a huge amount of intelligence. They spent a huge amount of money. Just the Israelis alone, $1.35 billion, according to their estimates. The Americans spent a lot of money too. And the Iranians spent maybe a couple of $1 million on these old drones, so which were decoys. And then Iran sent some old missiles, and the same thing happened. And then the Iranians, alongside the old missiles, fired a handful of missiles that were more modern, not the most modern, and they went right through the defense system and hit the two bases, the air base in the south and the intelligence gathering base on the Golan Heights. And they showed the Israelis that they can't stop them, even though these two bases are probably the most well-protected bases in the world through the air defense system there. So the Iranians gained information. It was a major success. It was very inexpensive, very costly for the Americans and the Israelis, especially now that there's a shortage of these missiles because they're being used in Ukraine as well. And the Iranians also showed the Israelis that we can hit wherever we want. Now, these Western governments and the Western mainstream media can claim it was a fantastic victory for Israel, which is fine. They can believe their own propaganda. But the problem is that if they believe their propaganda, then their calculations will be wrong. And then if tomorrow the Israeli regime strikes Iran, the Iranians will strike back in a way in which they will all be stunned, because it won't be a couple of hundred old drones and a few old missiles. It will be thousands of very modern missiles and drones that will rain in onto the heads of the Israeli armed forces, and they won't be given a warning. They won't be given heads up like they did last time. So it's up to the regime, the Israeli regime. Does it want to get badly battered and believe its own propaganda and be severely punished, or is it going to back down and move on?
Well, judging by Cameron's visit today, they're not going to back down or move on. And therefore, we must assume, unless Netanyahu is overthrown in the interim, which is, of course, a possibility, leading to at least a hiatus in which new calibrations are made, or we're into a terrible, terrible situation, which could escalate because, as I was saying earlier in my monologue, Iran has the support of China and Russia. Israel has the support of the United Kingdom, sometimes France, and a reluctant Joe Biden, who must be cursing his luck that this is all happening when he is so befuddled. Other people are having to take the decisions for him. It is therefore justifiable to say that we could be on the verge of a world conflagration. Might we not?
It's possible. It's possible. if the Israeli regime strikes Iran, Iran will strike back much harder. And that could lead to a situation where the Americans are pushed to intervene. If the Americans strike Iran, then imagine what the Iranian response will be. First of all, we have large numbers of underground bases for drones and missiles. And Iran is a very high-tech country when it comes to these military capabilities. The West themselves grudgingly acknowledge it when they claim that Iran is helping the Russians. So Iran has all these underground bases across the country with hundreds of thousands of drones and missiles. So if the Americans strike Iran, what happens? Their bases will be overrun in Iraq. The Iraqi resistance will not tolerate them. They'll be gone. And perhaps the embassy will be gone. And they will be expelled from Syria because their illegal occupation in Syria depends on Iraq. And then their bases in the Persian Gulf region will be destroyed. And these are just a couple of minutes away for Iranian missiles. And then those countries that host those bases, they will be seen as partners in crime. They will pay the price, and their oil and gas installations will be destroyed. So oil and gas in from the Caucasus and especially the Persian Gulf, they will be off the market. And that will create a global economic catastrophe, I think, far worse than 1929. So there is a possibility that we will go there. Personally, I think that there are enough sane people in the United States, pretty evil, but sane people in the United States political establishment that recognize the danger. But who knows? So we'll see if the Israeli regime, from the very beginning, this is what we were all saying. This is what you were saying. This is what I also believe, that this genocidal war, if the Americans don't pull or yank on the leash of their mad dogs in Tel Aviv, it's going to escalate. Because the Israeli regime has lost in Gaza, it's lost alongside the war in Lebanon. They're humiliated. They've across the world, they're now despised because of the genocide. So they either have to give up and be humiliated, or they have to expand the war to find a route to victory or to escape defeat. But it's only going to make things worse and more dangerous.
That was such a perfect answer. I'm almost tempted to close the interview now because that answer could scarcely be bettered. But let me ask you, if you like, a tangential question. And you're not a government representative, you're not a diplomat, so we can talk as if nobody else was present. It must have been a bitter pill to swallow that an Arab government, we've long ago given up hope of most of these Arab governments of doing anything for the Palestinians. But last weekend we saw something quite novel. We had an Arab government, which, by the way, has millions of Palestinians within its population, actually go to war for Israel to use their military capabilities to blunt the Iranian retaliation to Israel's crime in Damascus. That must be quite a difficult thing for you to accept in Iran.
A couple of things. One is that just 2-3 weeks ago, or a bit more, before they struck the Iranian embassy, the Israelis struck an Iranian-affiliated base near Aleppo in order to help the ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists in Aleppo, those that are being supported by NATO and their affiliates. And they flew over the Jordanian territory to Al-Tanaf near the Iraqi border and then flew into Syria. So they went around Syrian air defenses. And so the Jordanians allowed them to fly all the way to Iraq and then enter Syria. And then they fired their missiles at those bases and returned. By the way, the Iranians have said the equation has changed, and they, from now on, any Iranian targets anywhere, if they're attacked, citizens or assets, the Iranians will retaliate from Iran. So that is an important change, and that's going to narrow down the scope of the Israeli military's ability to function in Syria. But in any case, the Jordanians allowed them to go through their territory to bomb Syria and to help these extremist groups. But when the Iranians fired the drones, as you rightly point out, the Jordanians helped the Americans and the Israelis down them. However, and I don't have information on this, this is speculation, 100%. I have a feeling that the Iranians intentionally sent these old drones, these dirt cheap drones over Jordan so that the Jordanian regime would expose itself and carry out these acts that they did, because that is ultimately going to make it more despised, and it puts more pressure on the regime in future when it comes to Israel and Palestine. This is just speculation. I really have no information, but I think that the Iranians did this on purpose, because ultimately these drones were not going to hit any targets. These were, as I said, drones that were cheap. They were meant to force the Israelis and the Americans to to use all their missiles, very expensive missiles, and for Iran to figure out what sort of defense capabilities they have. So they were for intelligence gathering, and the Americans and the Israelis fell into the trap. But I'm guessing that the Iranians did this so that the Jordanian regime would be put under pressure, and that would give people on the ground more incentive to put pressure on the regime with regards to what's going on in Palestine.
Now, finally, Professor, of course, the West has spent a lot of money, a lot of time fomenting opposition inside Iran and encamping some elements of opposition outside of Iran. I'm thinking of the MK terrorist outfit. I think the last time I saw they were in Albania. The puppet crown prince, so-called, the son of Pahlavi, the deposed Shah of Iran. These monarchists exist. The MK terrorists exist. A pink ramp exists. A feminist ramp exists. They have many. Arrows in their bag. What's the public view in Iran about the situation? Are they steady as they face this potential escalation in events? What's the parliament saying? Are there any dissenters in the government? It would be interesting for our audience to know.
You know, George, Iranians have always traditionally supported the Palestinians, but there's always been a minority in Iran that was more, let's say, liberal and pro-Western, and their views differed, always. And there's always been a debate about how much Iran should support the Palestinians and how, weapons, how much should we spend on their defenses and so on. Some believe we should do more, some less. Most, I think, believe that what we're doing now is about right, which is basically what led to the resistance being able to hold Gaza for 6-7 months, and the Lebanese Hezbollah the same. Of course, they're heroics alongside those infrastructure, the infrastructure that was created. But after October the 7th and after the genocide, just like the rest of the world, just like in where you are, the mood has changed. So those who supported Palestine, they continue to support Palestine. They are, they've always been the majority. But that minority that thought we should cut a deal with the Israelis and support a two-state solution and all that, their numbers have diminished. I have a couple of people who are actually pretty close to me, and we would have discussions about Israel, and they would have differing views than me. My view has always been that it's illegitimate, and that apartheid must be altogether, the regime must be dismantled, and that Jews, Christians, and Muslims should live together as equals in the land. Those people who thought differently, they're changing. They're shifting because they're seeing the genocide. So the Israeli regime, I personally believe that the greatest defeat was not actually on the battlefield. They were defeated in Gaza. They were defeated against Lebanon. They were defeated in the exchange so far with Iran. They've been defeated by Ansarullah or the Yemeni armed forces. But the greatest defeat is due to the genocide that they're carrying out. They've destroyed themselves across the world. And of course, Western regimes are sacrificing themselves and their credibility and their image for the Israelis too. But I think that Iran, alongside the rest of the world, in Iran, the position is hardening. And this is only going to make things worse for the Israelis. And the Iranians overwhelmingly, from what I've seen, and it's anecdotal, overwhelmingly supported the Iranian strike.
Very interesting. Professor, as always, Seyed Mohammad Marandi, thank you for your wisdom and your time. And stay safe. Has Israel lost the war? Answer, yes or no. 35,682 people have voted. Not bad for a Wednesday night. Get your vote in the next 30 minutes, if you can. Let me take a quick break, then calls from Harrogate in England and California in the USA. Stay tuned. On YouTube, Keith Mitchell says, your success in Rochdale has made many, many more than just those who voted for you. As Roger Waters' mum says, do the right thing, George. Keep right with those in Rochdale and they will stand by you at the general election. I want to thank the great Roger Waters for his fulsome support in the contest. I want to thank Low Key, our own considerable genius, for coming to Rochdale and performing so brilliantly, so dazzlingly in the constituency. I want you all to write this down. I was listening today to Low Key's track, Long Live Palestine. And I always knew that it was musically extremely beautiful and inspiring. You know, the one with the chorus, Free, Free Palestine. But today, for some reason, in a car, I played it and I listened very carefully to the lyrics, which proved to me again that Low Key isn't just a recording artist, isn't just an indefatigable activist. He is a professorial political genius. So write it down, Long Live Palestine. Watch it on Spotify at the end of this show by Low Key, Lowkey.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, the floor is yours. You have the conch. For those of you who have read Lord of the Flies, you have the microphone. Nahid in Harrogate definitely has. Nahid is up first. Go ahead. What would you like to say?
Good evening, George. Thank you for having me on. My question to you, first of all, I also want to thank you for being the voice of reason in the Commons, because we've really missed that. My question to you is, we're facing a two-party system here, Labour or Conservative, one of the same as you've said. And worse than that is that there's no independence, so they're not acting in the public interest. They're acting in their self-interest, and they're being funded by lobbies who are basically pulling the strings. Shouldn't this be outlawed? What can you do to legislate to stop this? Because we no longer, the electorate, have any power with this, financial system basically running our politics and self-interest.
It's a very powerful call, Nahid. Very, very powerful. But it's a bit like the question about the United Nations earlier in the show. In order to do something about it, you would have to get the support of the corrupt people that we are, both of us, against. So there's no possibility that this uni-party parliament that we have now will investigate itself, reform itself. It's party time here. I mean, in this building right now, when I'm talking to you, it's party time. It's champagne time for hundreds of members of parliament. There are some good members of parliament, of course, but not nearly as many as there once was. But for the system, it's party time. They're not going to change that. We have a government that gave hundreds of millions, maybe billions, of pounds worth of public contracts to non-performers, to people who'd never performed before, to their publicans, to their relatives, to their donors. Hundreds of millions of public money in the mishandled COVID fiasco. That's how corrupt our country has become. Now, you're young. I'm so old that my father used to talk to me about how uncorrupt Britain was. By comparison, he used to name them. For some reason, he had a particular down on Italy. He'd talk about Italy having a new government every 6 months. That's before Britain had a new prime minister every 6 months. He'd talk to me about corruption in government in Italy. That's before we became 10 times more corrupt than Italy. And it's all because we have a uni-party government, a uni-party parliament. They're all the same. If you'd been with me in the debate, I'll not go into it, on the total smoking ban yesterday in Parliament, you would have seen two front benches, if I can paraphrase Animal Farm by George Orwell. They looked from man to pig and pig to man and man to pig and back again and could no longer tell the difference between the two. It was complete uni-party government. The day before, in the statement on Monday, in which I participated, about the Israel-Iran conflict, it was exactly the same, except in larger numbers. The government front bench and the Labour front bench constituted, with the backbenchers behind them rather, constituted 7/8 of the members of the parliament, and they were as one. They heard at the same things, they cheered the same vainglorious nonsense, they jeered the only discordant voices, myself, Jeremy Corbyn, one or two others, but only one or two others. It was uni-party government, parliament, in plain vision, in real time, right in front of my eyes. So the only thing we can do, Nahid, is change the members of parliament. That's all we can do. We'll never change the existing politicians, so we have to pick new ones. Now, I was in Hounslow in West London last night at an enormous public meeting called at short notice, with me as the speaker. Hundreds of people came, and many of them wanted to be candidates. You know, we've got about 50 candidates in London alone. And the general election hasn't even been called yet. We've got hundreds of candidates all over the country, north to south, ready to go, ready to pay their own election costs, ready to be on the ballot paper as workers' candidates. I think this is an idea whose time has come. My take, and I'm in Luton tomorrow night, I'll tell you how it goes. You'll see on social media. I'm in Newcastle on Friday night. I'm in Rochdale on Saturday. This is an idea whose time has come. People have had enough of this corrupt, incompetent government, which has betrayed Britain, betrayed British people and British interests. And it's time to say, as Cromwell did, you have sat here too long. For all the good that you have been doing, be gone. And that is what we need to do at the British general election when it comes. Tyrone is on the line in California on Biden. Tyrone, what would you like to say?
George, first I want to say that it's a great honor to speak to you. I think you're one of the great orators. Your connection with your higher self is evident in your speech. I'm a musician, and I appreciate alignment with the higher self, with the spirit. A good jazz musician, a good orator, and there's only a few, but you're one of them by far. And it's like it's a pleasure. It's an honor to speak to you. It's an honor to speak to you.
By the way, Tyrone, let me interrupt you for a moment. We made a deal yesterday to be on radio, FM, in California with the mother of all talk shows. Right after the show, KPFM will be broadcasting the mother of all talk shows from a very powerful transmitter on a mountain somewhere in California, and we'll be heard all over your state. So you're watching us already, but the KPFM will be broadcasting us right afterwards to those people who haven't yet caught up with the mother of all talk shows. Please forgive my interruption. Go ahead, Tyrone.
No. I think you're talking about KPFK, which broke my heart several ways with their Democratic crap. But I come from a political family. Let me just say, my grandfather was the first congressman from Asia. I met Nancy Pelosi in 2007, and I grew up campaigning. And I will, before I make my point, I'll give you a quick bit of advice for the Workers' Party. Open your own print shop. Get a cheap printer. Print your own materials. Don't pay them. All right. So my issue is Biden, who sniffs young people's hair, and I'm being delicate because I know that it'll get you kicked off YouTube. In fact, I was at. Sorry, I'm in Italy right now. I'm looking at the Tevere Valley, but I'm trying to put it delicately because there's things that will get you kicked off YouTube. But he's got the most money from AIPAC, and when the system is completely corrupt, it's easy to see who to get rid of, and the fact that he's got the most money from Italy, and this Epstein thing is no joke. It's serious. There's they've self-selected pedophiles because to be homosexual is not enough anymore. To blackmail people, they take money. And so this group that we have, I like Scott Ritter's strategy. If you want strategy, he says we need a night of the long knives. Someone in the CIA.
Yeah, not literally, of course, Tyrone, but metaphorically we do. And elections are the only peaceful way that we can do that. We need it. You're right about Epstein. It's underrated, the importance of the Epstein scandal. It's quite clear that bribery is not enough. First of all, there are people who get greedy. They are ready to switch their allegiance. Maybe China would bribe them more. Maybe Russia would bribe them more. Maybe Iran would bribe them more. So the bribery isn't enough. You need a mixture of bribery and what the Russians call compromat, compromising photographs and evidence that show the venality of the corrupt. Not just the financial corruption, but their venal behavior towards others, others often vulnerable, others often young, others sometimes underage, illegal others. They need that. And Epstein was that. He was an intelligence gathering operation. And there may be many others. We know about Epstein. Maybe we don't yet know about all the others. Tyrone, thanks for the call. Rosie Mylene says, perhaps George should investigate Rishi Sunak's father-in-law's contracts with Israel and ask about them in question time. So the grift and corruption are part of the written public record. Thanks, Rosie. Adam in Bedfordshire says, in Parliament, when you talked about Iranian UK history, why did the other MPs giggle like little children? What was going on in their minds? Well, Adam, many of them are little children. They were giggling because I said in my lifetime, meaning I'm old. Sure, I'm old, but that is part of the reason why I know so much. It's part of the reason why I have the experience that they don't have. But the truth is, even those who are not young, are not teenage scribblers, just have a blank spot about the crimes of empire in general and about the crimes of empire in Iran in particular. 2 members of parliament asked me afterwards, and neither was young, what did I mean when I said that Britain overthrew Iran's only ever democratic socialist government? They'd never heard of Mossadegh. Members of parliament. Wow. Antonio Jaramillo says, Mr. Galloway, your MOATS program is the greatest. You stand for justice, and you open your channel to the most balanced, well-informed analysts of the actual international situation. Thank you kindly, Antonio. Let's go back to California. Who wouldn't? And hear Michael on Israel. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you so much, George. It's a real honor to talk with you. And we know the situation is very dangerous right now. And I'd like to step back for a moment and consider what you said with George Orwell. We know George Orwell said, whoever controls the past controls the future. And speaking of Israel, I'd like to think about 9/11. I don't know if you've ever spoken with Professor Alan Sabrowski or Christopher Bolin. I believe if you do, we can bring Israel into closer focus because there is strong evidence that Israel was pivotal and probably the most involved in that. And in fact, as you may recall, there were 4 or 5 Israelis who were arrested on 9/11. They were in New Jersey, and they were filming the towers as they were burning. And when they collapsed, a woman was upstairs in an apartment house, and she saw them cheering when the tower came down. She called the police. They were arrested. About 2 months later, they were released. They were Israelis. They went back to Israel. They were on TV in Israel. And the host of the program asked them, what were you doing in the United States on 9/11? And one of them said, our purpose was to document the event. We have that on videotape. It was on YouTube, but YouTube deleted the tape. You can now find it on the Wayback channel. Now, that certainly indicates that prior knowledge. So who hired them? Well, the thought is that they were Mossad.
Well, I remain, thanks, Michael, for the interesting call, and we'll look up these names that you mentioned. I remain entirely of the view that Al-Qaeda was responsible for the events of 9/11, but who is Al-Qaeda? Who really is Al-Qaeda? Who started Al-Qaeda? Who facilitated Al-Qaeda? That is, if you like, what the Americans used to call the $64,000 question, when $64,000 was a very great deal of money. Yad is asking in the YouTube chat, George, are you drinking Russian vodka in your parliament office? Actually, it is pristine water. And I have never drunk Russian vodka, or any alcohol of any kind at any time in my entire life. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Yad. The MOATS podcast is number 12 in Russia this week and number 1 in the Bahamas. Don't forget, you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Our professor, our legend, Simon in Florida, is on the line. Let's hear from him. Simon, always welcome. What have you got for us this week?
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway. I'm going to run through these points very quickly so other callers have a chance as well. So today is the 50th anniversary of the Palestinian Prisoners' Day, 17th of April, 1974. It's also the 63rd anniversary of the Bay of Pigs fiasco, the American-supported invasion of Cuba, 17th of April, 1961, that a very young President Kennedy was bamboozled into by the CIA, and that is what led him to then say that he wished to tear the CIA up into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds, which obviously, unfortunately, never occurred. And if people would like to possibly draw parallels with movies, I think many of your audience, and you might like to recommend this, some of your younger colleagues in the House of the Parliament, might like to pay very close attention to the 1986 movie with Gabriel Byrne called Defense of the Realm, that mirrors these current circumstances very closely.
Wonderful film.
Now, your audience who pay close attention to the nuances of the words that you and I both use will recall that Professor Marandi just confirmed what I told you on Sunday, which was the Iranians using the phrase, the new equation. Now, the Yemenis are saying that applies to them as well in a collective with the Iranians, as have Hezbollah. They have done a massive response attack today, Hezbollah has, that appears to have killed and wounded 18 soldiers of Israeli special unit. And the reason why these things are very important is if people would refer, and you may well have done this because I've sent it in the past to your staff, and I noticed when listening very carefully to your question to the Prime Minister in the Houses of Parliament recently, you mentioned a defence treaty or some other such sort. And indeed, a type of defence treaty exists between the United Kingdom and Israel. It's called the UK-Israel Roadmap to 2030. And if people look in the 4th paragraph of the preamble, which is called the vision, or in Part D of Section 3 under Defence and Security in the main body of the document, they will see that mutual defence and security in relation to countering Iranian threats is specifically mentioned with the word Iran, or the name Iran, 4 times in the document. So I would suggest that which has to be read in coordination with a document that was signed by the British CDS with the Israeli Chief of General Staff in December of 2020, those 2 documents together to essentially form a defense treaty. Now, when one says, well, why aren't we at war? We are at war with the Yemenis. Britain and or the United States have now bombed them 20 times. A U.S. admiral went to Congress this week and asked for $2 billion, billion with a B, for replacement missiles. And one should always remember, and I would invite your audience to look it up on somewhere as easy as Wikipedia, the phony war, Phoney. That was the beginning of World War II. It lasted for 8 months, and it started with economic sanctions. And what are Britain and America and the European Union doing today and yesterday? They're putting on economic sanctions against Iran. So if we're either in the movie or we're reliving the phony war, putting aside the poor Yemenis who are being bombed very, very heavily, we have the new equation. We're spending billions of dollars attacking these people, and we have a pair of documents that appear to form a binding mutual defense pact with the nation of Israel.
Yeah, and we're almost at the 8-month stage, Professor. I think that I couldn't put any of that better than you have. I shan't try. I said to the Prime Minister, because like you, I choose my words very carefully. I may appear to be angry. I may appear to be heated or passionate, as the Minister called me today, but I never am so heated, so passionate, or so angry as to do other than choose my words carefully. I said to the Prime Minister that we have no treaty with Israel, at least not one that Parliament has been shown. And that was to draw attention to what you just have, that we have secret military obligations to the state of Israel. That's why Cameron's there today. That's why Cameron said what he did today. And it's why Britain, for all its hand-wringing about humanitarian disaster, cannot and will not dissociate itself from the apartheid colonial settler state that we ourselves originally founded. Thank you, Simon, for an excellent tour of the horizon. Now, I told you at the beginning I'm missing my wife. I mean I'm missing her very much, but I also mean I'm missing her. That's why my beard is so white this evening. Gayatri, wonderful to see you. I wish you were here or I was there. What's rattling this evening?
Well, you're there and you got to speak in Parliament not once but twice today. What are the chances? That was Monday, Wednesday twice. You only missed to speak at the Pete debate, which is of big importance to all the people living in the countryside like us. And on the tobacco debate.
Important. That's all. I mean, I really wish I'd got in on that. There was a measure before the House to prohibit the sale of peat. But we burn peat. Country people like us, people who live in the countryside, are very lucky to be able to burn peat. And they're trying to ban it, all in the name of this crazy
they want to ban it and let us...
anyway, go on. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes. Let's go ahead. Matthew White says, the only real politician in Westminster spoke again today at Prime Minister's question. Watching George in Parliament reminds me of what Parliament looked like and sounded like when I was a kid growing up in the 1980s. And Fast Dry says, he observes that our governments are gangsters, Bloods versus Crips, just bullies. And Congo Tracker says, George, I'm so glad you're there, but it must be infuriating to deal with some of these paid actors. And this one is from Campbell. He says, George, may God bless you. I watched you yesterday standing up in Westminster and declaring your own war on Sunak and Starmer with them whimpering. Thank you so much for being the voice of truth. I was so happy seeing you with Corbyn beside you. You two men have been chosen by God for this exact moment in time. May the Holy Spirit reside within you both and protect you both. I'm from your neck of the woods in Glasgow, Kirkintilloch.
I mean, thank you very much indeed for that. I'm, as you know, not a person who is afraid of anyone but God. And so they don't scare me at all. They don't impress me much. And both, I think, are apparent to all of them. The hostility they feel, someone called it in The Spectator today, a surly silence when I speak. I'm not sure how you can infer that a silence is surly, but I know what he means. But they're silent. They dare not call out. They dare not jeer me on the Labour side. They sit in total silence when I speak on the Labour side for two reasons. One, I'm the ghost of their past, because once upon a time, this was the kind of politics that they believed in. But secondly, they know that if they do behave badly towards me in the chamber, their own constituents will see it. And that might cost them a perhaps decisive number of votes in the general election. So they don't look, they don't speak, they sit in surly silence. Great phrase that. Lloyd Evans in The Spectator today. He's been writing about me, by the way, for at least 30 years. I'm surprised he's still alive. He's still alive and spitting. Go ahead, Gayatri. Any more?
Well, I've got a few on the poll. Has Israel lost the war? Majority answered yes. They believe so. Even the mainstream media are reporting the slaughter more than they did at the start, says Bernsey. Now they're acting like they're all heroes of journalism, but we remember they did turn a blind eye in the beginning. And Jonathan Wood says, by all metrics, they are now exposed as the pariahs of the civilized world. And I have seen this word pariah popping up everywhere in regards to Israel. They're becoming a liability to the West, aren't they? Because it has, Sunak, of course, answered you saying, we want Israel to remain in restraint and not retaliate any further. But, I think the Frankenstein monster has gone completely loose. So they have become a pariah, and
that's a perfect point to end on. As I always used to say to David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, have you read Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein? And if you have, did you read it to the end? Because when you build a monster, the reason it's called a monster is that you cannot control it in the end once you've created it. And I think that's the situation with Netanyahu's regime now. They made this monster. They bred this vicious attack dog with all its ferocity, thinking they could keep it on a lead, only to discover that these devil dogs are called devil dogs for a reason. Gayatri, I miss you very much. Thank you very much. I'll see you on Friday, God willing, in Newcastle. And thanks for that social media roundup. Let's go to Hassan in London on the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Hassan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. Good to speak to you. So I believe in sort of democratic participation and rewarding and punishing parties and politicians for how they've behaved. And Sadiq Khan, I think, has been very weak on Gaza. He has not spoken in favor of sanctions. He hasn't spoken out in favor of ending arms sales or against the genocide. So I don't want to vote for him or for Labour. But I wanted your advice in terms of who should we vote for, because everybody gets 3 votes, and I want to use them to reward people that have been true to Palestine and other leftist issues?
It's a very good question, and moreover, I'm not able tonight to give you an answer to it. If this election in London had come 1 year from now, we would have had a candidate and a full slate of London Assembly candidates, but we don't. We don't have the resources, didn't have the resources to fight our by-election in Rochdale, then the local elections, including the mayoral election in London. And of course, because I was elected in Rochdale, my candidacy in London necessarily fell, and we were not able, and I'm sorry about that, to give our supporters in London a proper opportunity to vote for our political approach. We don't have a line on who to vote for. Indeed, I don't even know who is standing. But I'll give you this assurance, Hassan. I will return to this issue on Sunday with recommendations as to what people who support me in London should do. I'm grateful to you. The legend, that is Norma, is on the line from Bristol. Go ahead, Norma.
Hello, George. Very good program. Now, Gerald Celente, he spoke about the fall of the Shah of Persia, and like your MPs, do you think you could, the ones who didn't know a lot of the history, I would like if you could explain a bit more to us about the history, because I don't know some of the stuff about Iran, and I know the Shah of Persia was very popular in this country at one time. So I wondered if you could explain in a quick one, because we haven't got much time, what a little bit of the back history.
I will do, and I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to do so, but we only have 3 minutes, so I'll be as quick as I can. Britain was the colonial power occupying Persia. We had a puppet Shah who allowed us to do so, but the growing popular groundswell in Iran over the issue of foreign occupation, and in particular foreign ownership of Iran's then only economic asset, which was the vast ocean of oil underneath its soil. Then they didn't know about the gas, but the oil was so plentiful that it should have made the lives of everyone in Iran very comfortable indeed. But of course it didn't, because it was owned by the British. The British occupation allowed what became BP to loot the Iranian natural resource which God had given them. And this generated, of course, a great deal of nationalist feeling, but also in the spirit of the times, 1950s we're talking about, when the Soviet Union existed, when the Soviet Union was just up the road, across the border, the influence of the very powerful Iranian Communist Party at the time, the Two-Day Party, and the popularity of the democratic socialist forces led by Dr. Mossadegh. Eventually, they forced the abdication of the Shah, drove him out of the country. That's the first Shah, the father of Pahlavi, that you know well. They forced him out, and they forced free elections to be held, and Mossadegh won them and became the only democratically elected leader that Iran has ever had. Imagine. And his first act was to nationalize the British-owned oil holdings, because that's what the Iranian people had voted for. And as soon as he nationalized the oil, the petrol, from what became BP, or what was actually by then BP, which was then a British nationalised company. I think it was Churchill in 1919 that nationalised BP. So we had the British state-owned Iran's petrol, oil. Mossadegh began the process of nationalising it to use the revenues for the benefit of the people of Iran. And the British and the Americans decided to overthrow him. And none of this is speculation or leftist propaganda. The people involved are still alive. One of them is in the House of Lords at the end of the corridor here. Believe it or not, she's still alive and in this Parliament building. The MI6 and the CIA organized the violent overthrow of the democratic government in Iran and reversed the nationalization of Iran's oil and reinstated the Shah, though this time the son of the Shah that had been overthrown. How's that for interference? How's that for electoral interference by a foreign power or powers in the domestic affairs of the people of Iran? And that situation persisted until the victory of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The oil was looted. Of course, a part of it was given to the comprador, collaborating class with the empire. The Shah got a bit. His ruling comprador circle got a bit. But the multinational corporations got the rest. And that existed under the dark shadow of the utter total dictatorship of the Shah of Persia, whose intelligence service, the SAVAK, was the most brutal torturers in the entire area, and there was a lot of competition for that accolade. The SAVAK and the Iranian armed forces kept the Shah in power, kept the multinational corporations' money rolling, kept the Iranian people in servitude and in poverty, and denied them their basic political, civil, and religious rights. And all the while, the gathering storm that became the Iranian people's retribution, their revenge on the West for what they had done to their country, was the Islamic Revolution, which triumphed in 1979. And since then, Iran, I'm not a supporter, by the way, of the political system in Iran. Someone like me wouldn't last all that long in politics in Iran. But I've got to tell you that Iran and Cuba are the only two surviving countries that since 1979 until now have been unrelenting, unremitting opponents of imperialism and all of its works. For now 45 years, the Iranian Revolution has remained true, at least in foreign policy, to the anti-imperialist camp. No other country other than Cuba can say that. Just think about that. No wonder they hate it. It's been marvelous for me. I really enjoyed the show. I hope you did too. 40,000 people voted in the poll, and overwhelmingly, you believe that Israel has lost the war. The last war, yeah. The war this weekend, let's wait and see. Join me on Sunday for the mother of all talk shows.